the standard way of doing sales is really designed for an aggressive, pushy personality. A lot of people were pretending to be this aggressive, pushy personality and dying inside while they were doing it. Like your prospect can feel that energy. And you dread it because you're having to do some kind of weird performance that's totally out of alignment for you. So you're not going to commit to it. You're not going to follow through on it. You're going to half ass it. And maybe some people will commit to it and they'll just hate it the entire time and find it incredibly draining. So there are strengths to every personality, sales strengths, and there are weaknesses. And the aggressive, pushy personality absolutely has its own weaknesses. And that person would really benefit from, learning how to strengthen their weaknesses too and become an even better salesperson.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And today we are talking sales. I'm super excited to introduce you to my friend and our guest today, Aleasha Bahr. She's a sales and messaging strategist. She's a speaker. She's a best-selling author of Black Sheep Sales and the founder of Black Sheep Sales Method. Because if it's a fit, it's a fact, and there's no selling involved. I love that. She is one of the only sales experts that has 15 years of experience creating sales strategies and messaging that is customized to your offer, your audience, and your personality. Because of her personality-driven approach, her methods make sales so much faster by providing powerful alternatives to the uncomfortable mainstream sales, aka icky sales. As a result, it empowers business owners to effortlessly convert up to 80% of their leads without the pressure, without the pitching, without pretending to be someone else. In her sales career, she and others have sold tens of millions in offers with her proven, personalized approach, the Black Sheep Sales Method. Aleasha, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here, Amanda. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk about sales with someone that has a methodology called the Black Sheep Sales Method. I'm so curious about where Black Sheep comes from.
Yeah. So, anytime that you're establishing a business or a brand, it's a bit of an evolution as you figure out who your target audience is and what to call it so that it's memorable and stands out, especially in sales. There's so much of the same thing, and salespeople are good at sales. So, they take a lot of the good phrases. Initially, it was like the subtle art of the secret art of subtle selling, but everybody was like, what does that mean?" And then I shifted to, like, for introverts, but a lot of people don't realize that being an introvert has nothing to do with being shy. So people really missed that. And then it was, a matchmaker sales method, which is closer because it's about fitting, right? But it still kind of feels like little old ladies are doing something. And so I was talking to a client one day about how my family wanted me to do something that I didn't want to do. And they were all talking about how difficult I was and how tired I was of being labeled the black sheep. And it's a bad thing that I won't just fall in line. And my client was like, "Me too." And then I talked to two more clients that week and they were like, "Me too." And I realized that they also did something in their industry that was different and kind of ruffled feathers because they said that, you could do it this way. And I was like, I think there's something here. I'm for the black sheep, the people who don't just fall in line without asking questions first, at least.
So good. Yeah, it appealed to me as well. And, we've been talking for a while now as we have gotten to know each other just about the nature of business and online marketing and the influence that is out there and how confusing that can be for business owners. Just like as brief as we can, what are the most important things? Like if somebody just wants to know how to close sales, what should they keep in mind?
Yeah, so it's a big question, and you want to customize things to your offer and your audience and your personality. But generally speaking, it is really important to ask questions and to never be the person who is talking alone like, if you catch yourself talking for more than 5 minutes, stop yourself and ask a question. Even if it's just like, is this information helpful for you right now? Just even if it's that. So you can understand if the other person is tracking with you. Because a lot of people will say, does that make sense? But I mean, have you ever gotten to the end of a conversation where they said it made sense the whole time and they ask a question and it's very clear it did not, in fact, make sense? It's because that question doesn't give anybody any information that they need. It's an automatic yes, they're zoned out. So, I mean, the questions that are really important to ask are like, what have you tried before to solve this problem? And what was the result of it? So you know how to position your offer compared to that. And you also know if your offer is different. Like maybe this person already did the stuff that you do and it's not a fit because they're a nightmare client or they don't have something set up that needs to be set up in order to get results or whatever. And then the other questions that are really important to ask are like, does this sound different from what you've done before? And does it feel more effective?
Mm.
And then at the end of the conversation, which is a real sticking point for a lot of people because they hear that they're supposed to say the price and then be absolutely silent, which is very awkward for most people. And the reason that mainstream sales says to do this is because a lot of people will say the price and then they'll just blab a bunch of stuff because they're real nervous about it. And you need to stop talking. That is a valid piece of advice. However, the less awkward way of doing that is to ask, is that investment realistic for you right now? So it continues this collaborative conversation and you're going to stop talking because you asked a question. So
That's so
those are some
interesting.
high
Yes,
level.
it does make sense. And I think that is easier to remember actually, that the pause, the time to pause is after you ask a question.
Natural.
That's a natural way that we tend, like if we were having coffee, that's exactly what we would do, right? And you know, starting out my business, I remember I wanted to be very good at sales, but I had to learn that what are you good at? So like when you're teaching sales, when you're showing people, how to set up a team or how to be really excellent at sales or more aligned in sales. Can you give me a few more of those things that maybe are conventionally taught that you tend to modify or help people pivot away from?
Yeah, totally. So I would say, like, the more status quo way of doing sales is that the beginning of the conversation, the discovery portion, is like, you're not supposed to talk, only the prospect talks. And so if the prospect asks a question, you're like, I'm asking the questions. Like you're supposed to control the call, right? And it starts to feel like an interrogation as a buyer. You're like, when do I get to ask questions? And like also like can I get some feedback on my answers? And in the standard in sales, you're supposed to like collect all of their answers and then throw them back at them in the pitch when the seller is talking for a long extended period of time. However, whenever a seller gets to this pitch part of their conversation, like, do you lean in and hang on every word? No. You're probably kind of zoned out and just waiting for them to finish and definitely thinking that they're exaggerating some things. You also don't remember what all of your answers were. So, what's more effective is something that I call pitch weaving. Where, like, in the discovery section, you're going to give somebody feedback on their answer. You can show some empathy for like, yeah, that's really frustrating when you invest in somebody and they deliver a completely different result than was promised. And it makes a big difference when, there's terms in the contract that allow you to, have a choice if it's turning out differently than what was promised or something like that, as an example. So,
Mhm.
something that lets the person know that there's a way it could be different and it's implied that that's you because in a standard sales conversation there's so much pressure put on the pitch and that's when people have their guard up the most. Nobody has their guard up during discovery. So when you're able to like weave in this information specific to their answer instead of like stacking all of the solutions to their answers in one section, it's just mimics a natural sales conversation. It makes the entire thing an exchange, a collaborative conversation. And then the other thing that is really standard in status quo sales conversations is this transition into the pitch that's like, okay, So they recap all the things that the person wants. And then they're like, okay, so I think that, this is what we do. Would you like to hear about it? And this is like a neon sign to someone, I'm about to pitch you.
Mhm.
So they know to have their guard up after this part of the conversation. And instead, I personally like to let them know that they're a fit. So it's totally fine to say, this is what I'm hearing from you. Is that accurate? Okay, great. Well, I don't see any big red flags here. Like you don't have your marketing dialed in, or you don't have some kind of lead flow, or you don't have staff that can support you in this. And you actually seem like a great fit because you have an established brand, you have people that get results from your offer. And it's just a matter of defining your messaging and having a structure that's predictable. And that's where we do our best work.
Mhm.
So it's this fitting idea. Somebody likes to know if they're a fit, rather than like, I'm about to pitch you.
I really love this. As you were describing the things that might deviate from what you might traditionally be. I love that, like status quo sales. Just sort of standard operating procedure kind of sales. What came up for me is that a lot of people have learned so much about marketing that sometimes they do marketing-y things in the sales conversation. And what I have a little rule internally, which is never go backwards in the relationship. So typically, like people will meet you through marketing. And so in a marketing context, that's where you see like a value stack and the pancake of like all the different features and the benefits. Because in one to many sales, that makes sense because you're speaking to a crowd. However, if you've moved into an intimate conversation where people are sharing their vulnerabilities, they're sharing their emotional experience, they're sharing like the nitty gritty details, the very reason that they're in that level of conversation with you versus just buying from the marketing is because they do need that additional nuance and they do need to feel heard and understood. So if you slide backwards in the relationship, what that would mean is like you bring a pancake of all of the value stack to the sales call. And watching some recordings of students over the years, it really does turn into this like stiff robotic interaction. And it's like, well, dude, I mean, like, no wonder the person didn't say yes. They were clearly nervous because so were you, right? And I think it's just because we try to market when it's more appropriate to sell. And I think a lot of people don't even really realize what that distinction is, That's so good.
That's a
You know,
powerful insight.
thank you. Thank you. And I love talking about this stuff with you, Alicia. Like you're so, good at what you do and it's just fun to talk about. So
Thanks.
I am really curious, like some entrepreneurs that I've been speaking to lately, I've been hearing this over and over again that they are having a hard time closing,
Good.
that they're finding that people are pushing back at the last minute and they're sharing objections. So they're saying things like, I think I'm going to need some more time, or we're redoing our budget, or, they're offering some kind of a reason, excuse to not commit in that moment. And a lot of the business owners that I've been speaking to, they're just getting frustrated because, and then they're saying, oh, well, it's the economy. Oh, well, it's this and that, which, the thing is like, yeah, the economy is what it is, and you can't control those macro effects. All you can decide to do is show up in the sales call the best way possible. So, for those entrepreneurs who maybe have historically had it easier with selling, which I do find a little dubious, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's ever like easy, but I am hearing a lot more complaining from entrepreneurs about the end of the sales call. From your experience, what do you think might be going on? And more importantly, how can they overcome objections more easily?
Yeah. So this is important. And yes, the economy is uncertain. And that means that you have to have an even better sales process. So if things were like easy before, sure, it could have been that people had extra money to play with and they didn't care if it worked or not. It could also mean that you were priced too cheaply before. A lot of times people will be like, you know, this is enough money that I don't care about losing it on this risk. If you have something that is a bigger investment during a time of unpredictability, then you need to have a process that makes the other person feel really clear and confident. And when it comes to objections, the standard way of approaching objections is to overcome them at the end of the conversation and to not talk about them before that because you don't want to, quote unquote, put an objection in someone's mind. Here's the thing, the objection is going to be there no matter what. It is very natural to leave a sales conversation and think your brain to think of all the reasons why this is a bad choice to keep you safe from making a bad choice. And they're in their own mental echo chamber where when they're doing that, or they're going to be talking to somebody who has no idea and they're not going to have all the context they need to help this person make a good decision. So you want to have that conversation with them. And you want to proactively prompt objections. So if you have things that often come up, like timing, for example, you would want to ask, so where does this fall in your priorities right now? What else do you have going on? And see if there's a way that your offer can complement whatever they have going on. Oh, okay, that's actually a really great time because this will facilitate and accelerate those results. And so you can have that conversation up front because when you're just overcoming things at the end of the conversation, you're coming from a defensive place. And it's also really invalidating to the person because and like think about yourself as a buyer. When someone's like, "Well, actually that's not an issue because blah, 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 blah." Of course you're going to say that, you know? They might be saying something super valid, but you're just like, whatever, you're trying to sell me and you're not going to hear it as well. But if you have it in throughout the conversation or in the beginning, they're able to hear you more. And it's a collaborative conversational exchange. So, another really important question and thing to do is to let somebody know when it doesn't work. Because everyone in a sales conversation is like, oh my God, like, what's the fine print here? Who are the exceptions? What are you not telling me? Just tell them. So, the only time it doesn't work is when somebody doesn't have someone who can manage the project side of this, or if you don't talk to me, if you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to check in with you a couple times. I'm not going to babysit you. You know, whatever it is. And then you ask, are there any concerns that this wouldn't be a fit right now?
Huh.
Again, because you want to prompt that early, like, let's talk it through ahead of time. Now, that doesn't mean that things won't come up at the end of the conversation. So if they do, you want to get curious because when you are just overcoming someone's objection, you're basically dismissing it. And if I have concerns, I don't want my concerns dismissed. It's not going to help me. Let's explore it together. Well, maybe that does make you not a fit. Let's talk about it. Like they say, I don't know, time's really tight right now. Okay, what's your schedule look like? Like, what time do you have? And if it's not a fit, that's okay. However, I would say 95% of the time, the person's just confused or has a lack of clarity, and you guys talk about it together and they untangle it themselves.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, getting away from fearing no, I think is a really big mindset shift that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if you maybe are newer to entrepreneurship, you haven't been through a hard cycle season just yet, like a lot of I think it can be very comforting to know that this is not the first time in history that the economy has felt disruption. Right. And, it may be your first time in this season, but it's not the first time. And, being okay with hearing no maybe more often. Or another one is like, not right now. So if you've got that rapport, then it's so much easier to re-engage the person because sometimes like that really is like legit. They do have a lot of things going on and this is super top of their mind. Otherwise they wouldn't be on the sales call with you. And they still need to resolve their priority to be able to make them the most of the engagement. So sometimes it really is better to say, let's put a pin in this for a month. Let's come back in a month or whatever the case may be and have a good system for following up such as with Claire Venute. That's exactly what we do. Coming back to the black sheep sales method, you do something that I don't see a lot of people talking about, actually none, which is modifying your sales approach to match your personality. Can you talk to me about that a little bit? Like what told you that was the way to go for some people and like what does make you different?
Yeah. So, I mean, I worked with so many people and so many different personalities that you know, really experience is what told me. And so many people, since the standard way of doing sales is really designed for an aggressive pushy personality, a lot of people were pretending to be this aggressive, pushy personality and dying inside while they were doing it. Like your prospect can feel that energy. And you dread it because you're having to do some kind of weird performance that's totally out of alignment for you. So you're not going to commit to it. You're not going to follow through on it. You're going to half ass it. And maybe some people will commit to it and they'll just hate it the entire time and find it incredibly draining. So there are strengths to every personality, sales strengths, and there are weaknesses. And the aggressive, pushy personality absolutely has its own weaknesses. And that person would really benefit from, learning how to strengthen their weaknesses too and become an even better salesperson. Because when you've really mastered sales, you have access to the strengths of all the personalities when you're talking to somebody. However, at first, let's say somebody is really a relationship builder. So, a lot of times, relationship builders are fantastic at talking about everything except business. And they have like a very delayed sales cycle because of that, because they feel pushy or salesy asking questions that are actually going to move the sale forward. Like, what's your timeline for making a decision on this? Or something like that. So, when they have questions that don't feel salesy, that move that forward and they implement them, it makes a huge difference for them. Or like, let's say someone who's more introverted. We call them like the inquisitive personality. They're naturally listening. They're naturally asking questions. They feel so uncomfortable pitching. All they want to do is ask questions and understand someone's situation and maybe like offer value, right? They end up educating and the other person is just totally overwhelmed and is like, okay, I can tell you know what you're doing and you ask great questions, but I have no idea what you're offering and if it's going to help me. So when they have a way of presenting their offer that doesn't feel salesy, all of a sudden they're like off to the races, right? So there's 5 personalities: the inquisitive educator, the relationship builder, the chatty charmer, the classic extrovert, the analytical perfectionist, the one who's like that's like your engineer person. And the enthusiastic persuader, which is the one that everybody thinks they need to be this like high energy, smiley, pushy, like dog with a bone on that sale, like persistent. And they miss a lot of cues that are important in the conversation and they aren't asking as many questions. So, yeah, whenever you know what somebody's weaknesses are, you can provide the structure that makes that weakness go away.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And I love how you talk about that too. As a high performance coach, you know, it is, of course, so wise to know your strengths and to play into those strengths. And when you really want to elevate to that next level of performance, it isn't just about always picking strength, 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 strength. Sometimes we need to shore up to make sure that our weaknesses are not losing the sale or compromising our performance. I love, love, love that. Okay, so Aleasha, if people wanted to know more about you and about Black Sheep Sales, what's the best way they can track you down?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a podcast called Sales is Not a Dirty Word that you can check out. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. And if you want my assessment, usually there is an investment associated with it. However, if you DM me on LinkedIn assessment, I will give it to you for free.
Woo, free baby. I love it. As you were describing the different pieces, I'm like, ooh, I think I might be the introvert, but I might also be the perfectionistic engineer. I got to check it out too. Aleasha, thank
Cool.
you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. It's been a really fun conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And dear listener, don't forget to follow Aleasha. Her details are around wherever you're listening or watching this show. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, which many people don't, make sure you do, right? You don't want to miss another episode. So hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening. And if you've been listening to us for a while, you know what's super cool is when you take a moment to do the review, because an honest review helps people to decide whether they're going to spend time with us or not. And we always want to be helping more people. So thank you so much for doing that. And by the way, if you've got any friends who have been maybe struggling with the sales or feeling the economy and just feeling very frustrated, be sure to grab this episode and text it to them. Send it to 3 of your friends. All right, my friend, we will see you on another episode. And until then, keep doing what matters.